This is part 2 of what life was like as a Branch Davidian under the rule of David Koresh, who was leader of the Branch Davidians, an extreme religious group who believed that they were destined to have a fight to the death with the forces of evil as part of the biblical events leading up to the apocalypse, and lived at a compound together in Waco, Texas. David Koresh was very fond of discipline to keep people in line. If a follower did something out of step with his directives, he would give them a dressing down in front of everyone, just for extra shame, or throw them out of the compound for a period of time. David was harshest on the children, however. Former members who were children recall being disciplined basically 24/7. Former members who were parents expressed deep regret over how they were told to beat their children and then followed through. One woman said she beat her child with a wooden paddle for minor infractions like spilling a glass of milk that would leave her feeling like an evil person, but at the same time, David had convinced her that God wanted and needed her to do this. Former members expressed how David Koresh's exacting standards all added up to the constant feeling of never quite being good enough, never quite being righteous enough, and that maybe with just a little bit more effort, one could finally reach that desired level of righteous obedience. And that feeling of maybe if I reach a little harder, I'll finally truly have God's favor is part of what kept people locked in on the religious beliefs. I'm a former Mormon, so I know all about that feeling. Followers were isolated from the outside world, but not just situationally because they happened to be at the compound in Waco, but because they believed that the world was evil, that God wanted them to separate themselves from any worldly thing in order to reach a higher level of spirituality. They gave up all their money and monetary possessions to David Koresh, leaving them dependent on him, such that they were not only psychologically dependent, trying to reach a higher level of spirituality that only he could provide, but also materially, with no real options if they were to leave. In reading accounts of those who survived the group, I also got a sense that at first, David was just a cool and charismatic guy who was into music and kind of a character. It was only over time that he kept taking the group to ever more extreme levels of obedience, with many former members reflecting after the fact that he always seemed to be after the next big thing to shock people and grab more attention and thus devotion. All of this is really right out of the Cult Leader's Handbook, you know? If you want to know more about the Branch Davidians, you can find a deep dive video about it on my YouTube that is very interesting, if I do say so myself. And feel free to follow along for more religious talk. Okay, thanks for hanging out with me. I love you. Bye.